This is Outdated, and welcome to episode 3 from season 1 of Adventure Autopsy. And today, we're going to have some exploratory surgery on the Cyberpunk Red Adventure, The Apartment, as found in the Jumpstart Kit for Cyberpunk Red by Autopsy Games. The Jumpstart Kit is basically a starter set, in case you're wondering what that means. That is the term they used for their starter set for this game. And it's actually a very good one. It's an excellent starter set. I highly recommend it. So inside, it comes with 2 softcover books. And inside this one, if you go about halfway back, okay, maybe a little further, 3/4 of the way back, you'll get to the adventure of The Apartment. And this is what we're going to look at today. So, this adventure is meant to be a starting point for your characters, and in that regard, we are going to judge it based on that criteria. Does it work as a first adventure for a new campaign? So first, let's talk about what is Cyberpunk Red. So, if you're thinking, hey, is this anything like Cyberpunk 2077? Yes. Cyberpunk 2077 is a computerized version of the Cyberpunk role-playing game that has been around since the 90s. Cyberpunk 2020 was the big one. It was really, really popular back in the 90s. It was hitting on all cylinders back then. Eventually, it kind of went away. They made a Cyberpunk 3. It'd be better we don't talk about it. And then Cyberpunk Red is supposed to kind of take place between Cyberpunk 2020 and Cyberpunk 2077. Matter of fact, it takes place in 2045, if I remember correctly, during what we call the Time of the Red. So, it is a cyberpunk future. Think kind of like Blade Runner, but much more of an emphasis on, like, the dystopian, war-torn apocalyptian thing with a lot of body modifications and less about, hey, are you real or synthetic? Although that, to a degree plays a role. I would say if you're looking at the cyberpunk genre when it comes to role-playing games, Cyberpunk Red is your number 1 choice. Sorry, it just is. I know there's other stuff out there. There's a Blade Runner game, which I think is fantastic, but it is also, it's cyberpunk with a police detective procedural twist, and I think that for that purpose, the police detective procedural thing, that's what makes it different and doesn't quite fit pure cyberpunk. Shadowrun, honestly, same thing. It's more of a fantasy punk. It's cyberpunk meets elves and dwarves and stuff, and so it kind of undermines the cyberpunk when cyber isn't the real deal and it's magic and all this stuff. This is just straight on direct cyberpunk, and I mean, like, the production value on these books is fantastic, and let's see how well they do on this adventure. So the adventure is called The Apartment, and it centers around, wait for it, an apartment. Okay, so the idea is that your group of characters live in an apartment building. Arguably, they all live in the same one, and arguably, one of those characters probably owns the apartment. I really like that idea, because it may set your characters up with a base of operations right off, and in a place like Night City, that's not a bad idea. Now, this base of operations is just a few blocks, like 4, outside of the combat zone, so it's, well, basically a bad neighborhood, but not as bad as, oh god, we just died. But it's at least semi-affordable. And I like the idea that, you spend some time discussing the apartment as a group and say, hey, okay, like, let's look at the map of the apartment, because you do get a map of what, like, some rooms look like. And you get some maps in the Jumpstart Kit that you could work with on that. You can name the apartment complex or whatever, which is really kind of neat. It gives you some ownership of it, right? So right off, I like that idea right there. It makes you invested in the apartment, because this whole adventure is basically making a stand to hold on to this apartment. And I don't mean a stand against that greedy bank because you weren't able to pay the mortgage. I mean something much worse. So, long story short, the corporation WorldSat has decided they want a new communications tower. And they want it exactly where your apartment building is standing. So, they have every intention to begin construction tomorrow. And no one's told you because they have no intention of asking. They are going to get rid of you one way or another. And this is Night City, and, you know, the laws, rules, it's, you know, kind of iffy. So, first thing you want to do is meet the neighbors. So you've got quite a few of them here, including yourself, including all the player characters. You have Gina Zapata, who actually owns some animals, including mostly she has a tortoise, she has a chameleon, and she has a salmon-crested cockatoo. And interestingly, these are actually real animals, not mechanical or cybernetic or anything like that, which is extremely rare, and there's a little bit of mystery behind how she might have gotten her hands on those. It actually acts as possibly an adventure seed down the road. You have Rico Robinson, who used to be a musician. He was a musician in a band. His band broke up, but he does perform every once in a while solo. You have the Andersons, which they're less of a family and more of a small street gang. But they live in there. They are an interesting bunch, but they all live here as well. And they generally claim they have never killed anybody that they didn't have to, and they seem to be largely not getting involved in crime anymore. But they do live in the apartment and just want to be left alone, largely. You've got Dr. Carver, who is a successful doctor somewhat, but he also, on the side, has opened up a Ripper Doc. He's rented an apartment right next to his and made it into a sterile room so he can do work on cybernetics and stuff like that. So you've got him there. And then lastly, you have Grant Young, who is a solo, which is Cyberpunk's version of, I guess you could say, a fighter, if you really wanted to go the D&D route. And he basically is in the employ of the fixer of the area, and he kind of is one of the reasons why people don't mess with the apartment too much, because they know he lives there. So you've got those neighbors, and plus, as the GM, you can put in more if you want to, you know. This gives you the opportunity, whenever your players are playing, to like interact with each other, interact with all these characters. But as they're doing so, I mean, like you kind of put them in a position where they have to role play with each other. And so I would suggest doing something to get that rolling. I don't know, like example, Grant Young likes to play cards on the roof. I think it's once a week. Maybe a bunch of the characters are there playing cards together. That could be a good reason to start interacting with each other, and when they find out and realize what's going on. Or maybe Rico's music's too loud and several people have to come, and like one of the neighbors decides to complain and others come to his defense because Gina doesn't mind, so she comes to his defense, and maybe the Andersons do mind and want him to shut the heck up, and you know, that sort of thing. And that could cause characters to get involved. Something to get them role-playing with each other, to get them invested in those characters. I mean, heck, it could be anything, really. But this is where you want to kind of come up with something on your own. I think that would help establish the relationship between the player characters, and the relationship with the player characters and these characters. So, but something's wrong in the neighborhood. This is where you'd want to really look at it. But what you're going to notice as the day goes on is there are some people parked in a car, and my dogs have decided to start barking. I don't know why. Something's going on out there. So what you're going to want to do, they're going to notice that there's a car parked that seems to be watching them. and you can't really figure out why or what's going on. So what your characters are going to start to wonder, what's up with this, but more than likely they're not even going to notice until part 3 rolls around. Now here you've got a lot of options. It gives you 4 different routes that the company WorldSat could use to go after you. This one, where there's smoke, is if you have a tech in your group. This one, Hack Attack, is if you have a Netrunner in your group. And then this one is if you're players or you love combat, and this one is if you really this is called Unknown Caller, and then this one is just business, is if you really like the neighbors and want the neighbors to be involved in all this stuff. So let's break them down one at a time real quickly. I would say you're only going to do probably one of these, or possibly 2, one after the other. But there's also the possibility of ramping up the difficulty and saying, okay, you know what, these guys are my players are really experienced. They've played games like this before. They know how to tactically think and strategize. I'm going to hit them with 2 of these at once. So that's something you can watch as well. So let's start with the first one, where there's smoke, okay? This is the one if there's a tech. So what happens is suddenly a fire truck shows up. The fire truck shows up, and they say that there's a fire alarm that's been pulled inside the building, and they start evacuating everybody out of the building. Once they get everybody out of the first floor, they plant smoke emitters in some of the apartments and lock the door behind them. These are not real firemen. They're actually security people that are just in excellent disguises. And those smoke emitters actually have C9 explosive attached to them that will go off in an hour. So what they're doing is having all that smoke billow out to get everybody else to leave. And then whenever the time comes, those 3 explosives will go out and the whole building collapses. And it just looks like a tragic accident. And then WorldSat comes in and builds their tower, and it's all over. If your characters discover what's actually going on. Like if you can tell, hey, wait a minute, you're not actually firefighters. A firefight's going to ensue. Like they're going to start shooting. The smoke emitter / bombs can be diffused, but you're going to have to diffuse all 3 of them. If you don't, if 1 or 2 of them go off, the building will collapse to the side and be unlivable. But if all 3 go off, the whole place collapses. But if you can get rid of all 3 of them and get rid of these guys, that's going to get the WorldSat people to go away, because they realize that your building's just too much trouble. Now, Unknown Caller is the next example. One of the characters' phones ring during all this. So now, the thing is, when this all goes down, everybody's agent, that's their, like, for lack of a better term, cell phone, it's like embedded or whatever, their communications device rings, but everybody's are down. There's no communication. It was cut off at the beginning of the scenario. That's their first hint something's up, that I kind of forgot to mention a minute ago because something's going on outside and we're still trying to figure out what it is. So, during that time, your agent shouldn't be able to ring, but it does. And when it does, the voice on the phone wants to speak to the owner of the apartment. And they offer him 100,000 euro bucks to buy the apartment. And they say they'll show him the money if they just come out to the window and look out the window so they can see that the money is real, so they can go get it. And so they might be tempted to do that. If they do, from 25 meters away, 2 people are going to open fire. So there's your combat right there. Now you've got like a last stand thing. So instead of the smoke one where it's like a ruse, here it's just a straight on, we're attacking and you're defending this apartment building. You're hiding behind a window, in windowed frames and stuff like that, and defending the building. It's just a blast. It would be, quite literally. This one could be really fun, but it is pure combat, right? That's why, if you're going to do them, like this one's the one for the combat side. Now, combat in Cyberpunk Red is extremely deadly. So that is something that, we need to be aware of. But you do have a lot of NPCs running around that could, be the fodder if you need it. But in Cyberpunk, I would not get super attached to characters. It's not as deadly as, say, a Delta Green or a Call of Cthulhu, but it is deadly. So it's way more deadly than, say, 5e. right? Where like it's almost impossible to kill a character, but you have to make it like a epic thing. And Cyberpunk, you have a pretty good shot of people dying almost every adventure here or there. So, if they're able to defend the building and like they're able to hold them off, then WorldSat gives up and they leave, and that's the end of that one. The third one, it's just business. This is where some of the neighbors in the apartment, so, you know, going back to, you know, Gina, the Andersons, Rico, Dr. Carver, Grant, Young, those guys. One of the neighbors comes up with the idea of gathering a group together to go talk to Rex. He's the fixer that's in charge of that area, to see if he can help. Where the other one has an idea to search the building room by room for jammers blocking the radio-based communication, because, as I said, that's how this whole thing starts. The problem is neither of these things are accurate, and in both cases, they're ambushes. And that you're actually being betrayed by people that live in the apartment. And each one has their own reason for betraying you. So it's up to, like, the GM as to which one. Like, say, it says here Gina is being blackmailed by WorldSat with information from her past. Rico's old band member is in WorldSat's hostage. The Andersons were offered a great deal of money. Yeah, of course they were. And Dr. Carver was as well. Or Grant was hired by Rex and by WorldSat to betray you. So you can just pick like one or two. You can pick two of them, and, you know, one of them is betraying with the fixer thing, and the other one is betraying with the finding the jammers thing. But if those ambushes fail, it's not worth the trouble. WorldSat gives up and they peace out. Last one, hack attack. This is one that you have to have a net runner, and this is where they literally attack the building from the roof, and they bring in a net runner who starts to like completely mess up with the building, starting with the room that everybody's holed up in. They like knock out the lights and the power and all this. It gives a -5 to all rolls for anyone in like fighting while inside that room. And every time the characters move, the net runner who's on the roof will just go after the next one, right? So it is another assault, kind of like Unknown Caller, but instead of, in its case, them attacking from the outside and the characters holding them off from the inside, unless, of course, they're able to breach the building. Here, they automatically breach the building from above, and they're working their way down. And so, yeah, that's like a room-by-room firefight, which is pretty interesting, with a net runner who's like hacking all the systems in the building, and your characters, if they have a net runner, has to fight them in virtual space to stop them. I really like that one, too. If you were to do two, like, if you have a net runner and you're doing two of these, one after the other, you want to do this one so the net runner feels like they got something to do. Honestly, it's just too good, right? If you have a tech as well, I'd feel like that one. But if you don't have both of those, then I'd just do one. I feel like hack attack should be the second one you do, because it's going to tear the house to heck. So you start at the bottom with where there's smoke, where the tech kind of becomes the hero. Then you do then go to the top of the building with hack attack. Now, and of course, if you do all right, I'm really going to mess with my players, you do both, right? Like in the middle of, as soon as you discover that the firefighters are fake, that's when they attack from above. So there's literally a fight in both directions. That would be intense, right? But as you can see, this adventure is dangerous. But they're fighting to protect possibly the neighbors, definitely themselves, and the apartment, the building, their home, right? And if they are able to win, they keep their home, at least for now. And that's kind of how it ends. That's the end of the adventure. It's not long, it's not complicated, but it's enough to get them started, and it's enough to establish what life in Night City is like. See, here's a map of like the floor plan for each floor, right? So you've got like 8 total apartments here. You got the main hallways. Now, it does not actually show windows. So I would assume that there's a window in the middle of each of these. That makes sense. And here's your stairs, here's your elevators, and laundry room. Wait, no, never mind. Here's the actual apartment. Do we see a window? That's a television. Okay, if this is the television, I would argue this would be where the window is. So on these, yeah, here, 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 and here, 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 and here, that's where you would find your windows, right? So that's how I would do it. And each floor is just like this one, and there's what, 4 floors, something like that, 3 floors. That's what I would look at. So how do I feel about this adventure? So first off, it is designed as a starter adventure, as your first adventure for a group playing Cyberpunk Red. In that regard, absolutely it works. Because Cyberpunk Red is a game that can lean into combat really heavy, and it does allow you to do that. It is a game that has different characters with vastly different abilities and specialties that you would want them to have the opportunity to showcase those specialties, like, say, the Netrunner or the Tech or a few other characters. It definitely gives you the ability to do that. I'm especially interested in the Netrunner one. And and the one with the firefighters is pretty cool, too. It gives you so much of a basis of, these are who our characters are. This is the neighborhood we're going to live in. It helps establish a reputation for those characters in that neighborhood for future adventures. It does a lot in a small amount of pages. And I think it's really, really good. I would say that if you are a new GM to Cyberpunk Red and new players, do it. If you're not, if you've been playing Cyberpunk before, but if you haven't used this, if it's a new group, go for it. I think as a new starting adventure, this one is fantastic, and I highly recommend it. So I would like to thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and this 3rd episode of Adventure Autopsy, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. I'm continuing to work my way through this 1st season of Adventure Autopsy. And in our 4th episode, we're going to return to Call of Cthulhu, and we are going to look at the adventure Paper Chase. So I look forward to seeing you there. And this has been Outdated. Peace out.